Fallacies are almost always included in critical thinking and informal logic courses because fallacies provide a shortcut to clearer reasoning by helping us avoid common errors. And that's what fallacies are: common errors in reasoning, errors that are so common they've been given names. By learning these fallacies and becoming comfortable with them, we can learn to avoid defective reasoning, and that's half the battle in becoming a logical, critical thinker. The fallacies I'll cover in this lecture and the fallacies covered in our text are not all the same. I've chosen these 14 because they're among the most common, and learning these will help you recognize others. When you see a fallacy with a Latin name, that usually means it's been around for a while. That's true of these first few. The first fallacy we'll look at is the argumentum ad hominem, which means against the man. Basically, when someone commits an ad hominem, they're attacking the character of the person instead of their actual argument. Imagine a political or public figure that maybe you don't like or get along with or something. They have a different political view or stance, and they give an argument to a crowd, and the response is, yeah, but this guy's an asshole. Instead of actually addressing what his argument is, you talk about his character and just completely neglect that maybe this person put forward an actual argument, and the conclusion of the argument might actually follow. So, when you commit an ad hominem, it doesn't follow from whatever it is that you say, whatever slanderous remark you make, that their conclusion doesn't follow, which is why this is fallacious. The second is the ad ignorantiam. It's the appeal to ignorance. For this fallacy, imagine maybe I'm saying something like, you can't prove that God doesn't exist, therefore I can conclude that he does. But that clearly doesn't follow. Just because someone else can't prove something's wrong, it doesn't automatically follow that my conclusion is right. I still need to provide an argument. And without an argument that supports my conclusion, this is just another fallacy. The next is the ad misericordiam, the appeal to your merciful heart. This is also called an appeal to pity. It's basically you're trying to bypass someone's reasoning ability by appealing to their emotions. It'd be like me saying, Professor, you can't give me an F this semester because my mom's in the hospital, and if I get a failing grade, she'll have a heart attack and die. So I haven't actually given an argument why I should pass or not fail. I've just said, these horrible things will happen if I don't. Next is the ad populum. It's the appeal to people, also called an appeal to popularity. It doesn't follow from these that our conclusions are correct either. An appeal to popularity would be kind of like, I don't know, there was a time when everyone thought the world was flat, for example, but it didn't follow from everyone's belief that the world actually was flat. Just because you believe something, it doesn't mean that reality is going to all of a sudden correspond to your belief. Another way you could think about this one, probably a more accurate way than what I just described. I had a roommate one time, and one day she said something I'll never forget. She said, I wasn't going to read 50 Shades of Grey, but I saw it at the store, and it sold over 1 million copies. So, since 1 million people can't be wrong, I bought the book. So, the key point of that little bit of reasoning there is that 1 million people can't be wrong. The conclusion must be true because so many people believe it. And as we saw with the flat earth example, it doesn't follow from the number of people believing something that the conclusion is true. The conclusion actually has to correspond to reality. Number 5 is begging the question, also known as circular reasoning. Basically, it's an argument that uses its conclusion as one of its premises, basically presupposing that the conclusion is true. So, a common example is, why do you believe this religious text? Because God wrote the religious text. Why do you think God wrote this religious text? Because it says so in the religious text that God wrote it. So the reasoning goes around in a circle, hence the circular argument. Next is the complex question. A complex question is a kind of fallacy that presents a question as though it's a singular question, but it's actually more than one. So if I went up to a student and asked, "Have you stopped cheating on your logic homework yet?" I'm asking it as though you could answer it yes or no, but it presupposes a couple things. It's, well, were you ever actually cheating on it? And then if you were, did you stop doing it? So it's more than one question, but it's being asked as though it's one. Equivocation is when a term or phrase is used in an argument in two different ways, but the difference between them is overlooked. So if I argue with someone, I don't know, this is going to be ridiculous. Feathers are all light. Nothing light is dark. Therefore, no feathers are dark. So there's a change there from the meaning of light from weight to color. Another example that lives rent-free in my mind is, you told me that you put all your money in the bank, but I went down to the river and dug all day and I didn't find any money. Therefore, you lied to me. Here, I didn't even need to use the word bank twice, but you can see that I equivocated the term bank from a financial institution to a riverbank. Those are kind of ridiculous, but believe it or not, this kind of thing, equivocation, does actually happen. Next is the slippery slope. Slippery slope is also very common, and as elections near, we'll hear this kind of reasoning. It's not difficult to imagine. The features of it are, one thing leads to another. It often becomes increasingly more serious, and ultimately results in a conclusion that no one finds appealing. So let's say someone argues, if a Democrat wins the election, then the borders will become weaker. If the borders become weaker, then we're going to get a flood of immigrants and the United States is going to collapse. So each step in that reasoning process is being presented as though the next step is assured by the last, when it's not. There are other alternatives. This is also used in scare tactics, for example. The next is the false cause, and this one's pretty simple, and paradoxically at the same time complicated. Basically, a false cause has been identified. You can imagine in previous years, someone mentioned something negative that's going on, and then they'd follow it with something like, "Thanks, Obama," as though Obama is the cause of whatever that thing is. But you need to provide an argument or some kind of observational data or something to show that that cause is real, at least in a basic argument. Just asserting a cause without argument leaves these kinds of things open to fallacious reasoning. Next is the false dilemma, or the false dichotomy. This is when a disjunction is presented as though there's no other alternatives. A common one is, America, love it or leave it. It's like, okay, yeah, you can love it, you can leave it, but if you don't love it, you could also stay and engage in the political process and vote against these laws that you think are immoral and help to change the country to become a better place, which is one of the points of America, to improve over time. So you don't need to just love it or leave it. You can also help change it for the better. The next is the overgeneralization fallacy, and this is at the core of a lot of isms like sexism and racism. An obvious example that comes to mind, I had a friend who said that she knows all men are hot-headed because all of the men in her family are hot-headed. But that sample size is too small. You can't generalize from just a few people to everyone in a specific group. So this line of reasoning is fallacious. Next is the red herring. The red herring is supposed to get its name from this story of prison guards would feed this really cheap fish to prisoners, and prisoners would save it and it would spoil. And during prison breaks, they would bring it with them and they'd throw it the opposite direction that they left, and then the smell of the rancid herring would distract the dogs and take them the opposite direction from the direction they went. And that's what you do in a red herring fallacy. Basically, you'll be having a conversation or an argument with someone, and they'll probably be talking about maybe reproductive rights or pregnancy termination at some early stage, and then the other person introduces, oh, yeah, but killing babies is immoral. Everyone knows that murder is wrong. It's loosely related, and it also has, forgive the metaphor, a strong stink to it. It's really emotionally charged, so it distracts everyone from the fact that the topic has actually been changed to something else. But it seems related enough that some people won't be able to tell that the argument has actually changed, so it's fallacious. The next is related. This is another common one, the straw man. The straw man is when you give an argument to someone, and then someone repeats it back to you in a much weaker form, and then refutes the much weaker form. Like if I said, we need to relax our laws on beer in San Diego County, and then someone says, yeah, great idea. Every society that allows unrestricted access to intoxicants always collapses. So it's loosely related, but it's not exactly what my argument was. That's much weaker. Allowing unrestricted access to everyone for intoxicants is a much more extreme and weaker argument than just relaxing laws in San Diego for beer production, or whatever it was I said first. The last fallacy we'll look at is called the genetic fallacy. You'll notice that a lot of these seem pretty loosely related, but that's because they're all fallacious. It doesn't follow from these things that a conclusion does or does not follow. That's what they have in common. The genetic fallacy is basically, because a certain person said something, the conclusion isn't true, without addressing the person's argument. It's like, this guy is a philosophy professor, so we shouldn't listen to what he says about physics. Or this guy is a physicist, so we shouldn't listen to what he has to say about psychology. It's as simple as that. We're just saying that the source is problematic for some reason, and we're writing off the argument with nothing else. You need to have an argument for your own conclusion, even if that conclusion is something like someone's an unqualified authority, or you're just giving the opposite conclusion of someone else. So there are many more fallacies, and like I said earlier, these are selected because I think if you get to learn these, get to know these, they'll help you recognize others in the future. But since there are so many fallacies, read the chapter, but also look for more in your daily life. Don't ever stop looking for these. New kinds of fallacious reasoning come up all the time. And once you do become comfortable with these, I'm willing to bet that you'll start seeing them everywhere. Often students tell me they're surprised how much BS is all around them, or has been all around them their whole lives, that they never noticed. So, have fun with that.